Craig Johnston.
Welcome to the pilot episode of Mobile Nation's Enterprise Show. My name is Craig Johnston, and joining me today is Rene Ritchie and Isaac Kendall, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We're going to be your hosts for the show today, and every month, we think. And the show is going to be all about enterprise mobile, that is mobile devices in the enterprise, because it's becoming a pretty hot topic these days. So let's get Rene to introduce himself. Rene.
My name is Rene, as Craig very kindly informed you. I am the producer of Mobile Nation's podcasting, and I am excited to be on this show because it is an important topic that we don't usually address in our further to touch on all things consumer.
That's very true. So what's your background, Rene?
I worked for about 10 years in high-end database analytics, things like customer insight, market basket analysis. The database that we worked on drove a lot of the very high-end analytics that you see things in, like customer loyalty and some government agencies and various other, what's the best word for it? When you want to find patterns of behavior and action, we were doing that kind of stuff. It had a good mix of mobile devices, so it was actually very interesting, especially to see the difference between what executives would use, salespeople would use, technology people would use. So I quite enjoyed it. I
think they call that persona, when you build a persona of someone, right?
Yeah, well, it's actually moving. Originally, you'd call it like a single customer view, and now because our data is getting so good, they want a view of a single customer, which, does kind of tie into all the stuff we're seeing now with Carrier IQ and with various other programs, or Siri or Google's, Google and Facebook's battle for identity. So I think it's going to be a hot topic in the near future.
Definitely. Right. And Isaac, tell us about yourself.
Hi, good morning, Craig, and welcome everybody. And I'm here in Vancouver at 5 a.m. Yes, a very dedicated member of this team. I'm a writer with Crackberry, writing enterprise mostly, and I spent 16 years in carrier corporate account sales and technical support, dealing with Blackberries, iPhones, Google phones, Windows phones, and go all the way back to the beginning of the Blackberry days with you, Craig, when they were just pagers. The good old days.
Back in the day. Can you tell us the carrier names, or are you not allowed to?
It's everybody's favorite Canadian carrier here, Rogers.
Do they call them robbers still?
That's Kevin's favorite inside term there, yeah.
Well, we're happy to have you on the show, both of you. We're both going to bring a great insight into the enterprise space. Just to give you a quick background on myself, I've been in the mobile space for about 11 years now. Started with the original RIM 850 pager / email device, which was a little thing that looked just like a BlackBerry. And I've had BlackBerry on my hip for a very long time. My current job is working for a company called Keen, or NTT Data, and my title is Mobile Evangelist, if you can believe it. Mobile Evangelist is my official title. So it sort of reminds me of the days when Apple had Apple Evangelists. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Guy Kowalski.
Yeah, so that's what I do, and I'm very much in the mobile space, and we talk to a lot of huge companies, global Fortune 100 companies, and we talk about mobile in the enterprise. So this show is actually perfect for the space that I'm in right now. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun on this show, and we're going to have a lot of really good information about how you handle mobile devices in the enterprise. So let's kick it off and just give an overall or overarching statement or a bit of information about what's going on. We can just talk about what's happening with mobile in the enterprise. So let's cast our minds back, way back in time, 10 years ago, to when the BlackBerry first hit the market space, and every lawyer on the planet wanted a BlackBerry. And of course, that then bled into the financial services space. And BlackBerry started really becoming popular. People had instant email, woohoo, and there wasn't even calendar and tasks or anything. It was just pure email. And the BlackBerry lasted for 2 weeks on a single AA battery. Yeah, and that's true, 2 weeks on a single AA battery. But, I mean, back in those days, it was a 3-line LCD screen, so it didn't do very much. But this is when this idea of having your instant email really caught on. Before that, people used to use SMS. and they used to forward the emails to SMS and get them by text messaging. Very clunky way of doing it, but the BlackBerry really changed things. And in 2007, along came the iPhone and blew the planet away. You know, as Steve Jobs likes to say, made a dent in the universe. And he certainly made a huge dent, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to copy the iPhone, and that's where Android came from, you know, big iPhone copy. Problem is that RIM didn't keep up. You know, as we know, RIM didn't keep up. They stumbled and stumbled and stumbled, and they're still stumbling. And so people are now starting to say, look, we are tired of you pushing this BlackBerry into our hand and telling us to run off and go and do our email. They're horrible things. They're not keeping up. I have an iPhone. I have a Droid X. I want to use that. Can I get my email on that?
You know what, Craig? The thing that I remember most vividly from the early days is that smartphones, and we kind of forget it now, but smartphones were so expensive. Mobile software was so expensive. Data was so expensive that you could see the evolution. First, the really well-paid executives would get it. And I remember like the first time a vice president walked in with a Trio, one of those big, you know, antenna-laden Trios, and that was something straight out of the future. It was Star Trek, and no one else could afford it, you know, at the company. Well,
there was also the Palm 7.
Yeah.
Back then, which ran on the Mobitex network, which is the same as BlackBerry. And, you know, I know we're just going to segue into this a little bit later, but where we have now a lot of people are, like you're alluding to, Greg, are bringing their own devices. They don't want to be forced to have a BlackBerry pushed down to them from the IT department. But I can remember when I first started doing data sales, people would be bringing, when I would talk to customers about, hey, you got to get these BlackBerries. And like Rene says, it was so expensive. And people were always, well, if my people want a BlackBerry, then they're going to have to buy it themselves. And then we transitioned into companies were buying BlackBerries, and now we're transitioning back, coming full circle back to, well, if they want an iPhone, they're going to have to go buy it themselves.
Was it Rogers? But before the iPhone came out, I believe I was paying $200 for 100 megabytes a month for a Trio with Rogers.
Don't get me started on data costs in Canada.
But I do remember the Palm 7, strangely enough. It had a funny, huge antenna that used to fold down.
Yeah, that whip-up antenna, that's right, yeah.
And then it wasn't really real-time data. It sort of cached the data on your device. It would download it in batches, and you would read it offline and stuff. It was really clunky.
But for 1998, it was quite, you know, something futuristic.
It was, yeah. But I suppose, you know, I was rambling a little bit there, but I was trying to bring us to the present day, which is essentially what enterprises are now dealing with. And I think a few things happened recently that have caused this this movement, say the protest from the employees, and that is, one is the global recession that started in 2008, where companies are trying to save money. Two is RIM is not keeping up, unfortunately, and people are defecting in huge numbers. And so those two things, I think, combined together have caused this, some people call consumerization of IT, which is where the consumers are now driving IT as opposed to IT driving the consumers or the employees. So that's where we are today. And this brings along a lot of issues, which we are going to talk about on the show every month.
Absolutely. And it's kind of interesting because for many years it was almost, at least in the IT departments I'm familiar with, a checkbox approach. If the device had A, B, C, and D, the CIO or the CTO would say, this is the device we're getting, and roll it out to everybody. And it was hard for an Apple-like company, even Palm or Microsoft sometimes, to get in there. But the consumerization seems to be the answer. They did an end run around the IT department and made devices that, be it the vice president or the CEO, would come in and say, I don't care if it's not on your list, you're going to support my device.
The strange thing, though, is that, Isaac, you may remember this, BlackBerry came in the same way. When BlackBerry first started, there was no BlackBerry Enterprise Server. You used to run a little redirector on your PC, and you left your PC on 24/7. And your PC spoke to Outlook, and then it used to redirect the emails to your BlackBerry using I think it sent SMTP emails, that's how your email arrived at your BlackBerry, and you would be able to respond and stuff like that. And so that's how it snuck in, because the IT department couldn't detect that. So that's how they did it.
Exactly. Yeah, it redirected your Exchange mail. And then if you remember, Craig too, would install that as a mistake, if they had an Exchange server, they installed a redirector, then they would get those lovely EPT messages every 30 seconds on their BlackBerry going, oh my goodness, what have I done?
Yeah. Yeah, so actually, RIM was clever that way back then, is that they did the same thing. They circumvented the IT department. And the funny thing is that's what's going on now, excepting it's being driven directly from the consumer. And the IT departments are freaking out because they're saying, what? I can't secure that thing. What am I going to do? The sky is falling. And the CEOs are telling them, no, you are going to do it. Do it now. Pressure, pressure. So, I think it's happening right now. We're literally on the wave at this minute, talking about it today. We're on the wave, and companies are all thinking about this.
It's a hot topic that they have to deal with.
And it's kind of remarkable, Craig, because you mentioned previously the iPhone came out in 2007, and then BlackBerry started making iPhone-like devices. But right before the iPhone was coming out, they were set to make very BlackBerry or Windows Mobile Standard or even Nokia-like devices. So they adapted very quickly to the new curve.
Yeah, I think you mean Android, Google. Yeah, that's
Google.
right. So those of you who, maybe we can put it in the show notes, but there is a great article that shows just how Google really did copy the iPhone, and all the Android fans will say, no, that's rubbish. They didn't copy them. But if you go back and have a look at the first Android device, you'll see it looks like a BlackBerry. It's got a D-pad navigation scheme. It's got the 4 buttons, back menu, search, and whatever the other one was.
Front-facing QWERTY.
Yeah, front-facing QWERTY keyboard, no touch screen, and the operating system was not built for touch in any way. And then when the iPhone came out, by the end of, I think, 2007, or sometime in 2008, the first G1 came out on T-Mobile, and that was the very first version of Android 1.5, and now all of a sudden it looked like an iPhone.
But much to their credit, right? Because we just spoke about how BlackBerry hasn't kept up, and Google very quickly saw the way the tide was going, changed on a dime, and managed to stay relevant.
Absolutely.
I think the challenge with BlackBerry is, well, the storm was BlackBerry's Me Too device. Oh, Apple made a touchscreen phone. Well, we can do that too. And even now in the BlackBerry 7 devices, we're still dealing with a roll and click OS that they keep trying to massage around a different environment. Whereas Apple put a piece of glass down on the table and said, let's design a phone around that. Whereas RIM is still just, really, Craig, it's still the click and scroll OS from 1998. Dressed up a little bit more.
You're absolutely right, and that's where the BBX phones next year are going to hopefully change that, because that's an operating system built from the ground up that isn't a BlackBerry. It's something
exactly. Else. It looks like the way that the Apple did it, where they put a piece of glass down and said, okay, let's design the OS around the screen, not design a screen around a click OS.
So let's talk about the kinds of things that we're going to talk about on the show, because people who are listening to this are going to say, okay, fine, we know all the stuff already. The CIO has actually called me 2 weeks ago, and he said, look, I want my iPhone to work on this network now, and I don't want any excuses. And the IT guy is saying, hold on a second, I know how to secure BlackBerries. I register these things with a BlackBerry server, and I can push out IT policies, and I can push out applications, and I can wipe the device, and I can do all these clever things. I can even monitor their BlackBerry messages. I can spy on them, and all these cool things that IT departments do for the BlackBerry. Now, what happens with these iPhones? I can't do that. And what about these Android phones? The thing is that you can do it, and we are here to say that you can actually secure these things just as well as a BlackBerry. And we're going to talk about some of those topics. Talk about how do you secure devices, how do you provide beautiful consumer applications to these devices instead of the old school BlackBerry style apps, and how do you manage these devices internally. And I think there's an extra little teeny thing that happens in companies today is when they allow people to bring their own devices. There is a mix at some point where the company is still providing devices and they're also letting people bring them in. How do you keep track of that? So these are these big things that these IT guys are thinking about. And Isaac, I'm sure you've seen this a lot, and there's definitely tools and services out there that help with this.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of these tools came out of just picking up the slack where the BlackBerry, even the RIM BlackBerry server, left some holes. And as these new devices have come out, Boxtone and so many of the other companies out there have jumped on that bandwagon long before anybody else did. So there's a great pile of platforms out there that do mobile device management like the Bez.
Any thoughts on that, Rene?
Yeah, I mean, I see it very vividly where I remember clearly all the salespeople had BlackBerries, and it was almost like that was the new generation of walkie-talkie. That was just what you needed to be out on the field. And then executives would start coming in, and I'd go to board meetings, and I would start to see iPhones, slowly one or two. And then in my later years, almost everyone at the table had iPhones. And they were willing to put up with less features because less features in terms of what enterprise would consider a feature from their end, because that's the device they wanted to use. And it was interesting to see how the IT department had to sort of like almost scurry sometimes to adapt. And I think ActiveSync support was one of the smart things Apple did going back in iOS 2 to kind of make it more palatable to enterprise.
It's funny you mention ActiveSync because I remember, of course, BlackBerry was the big thing, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And Microsoft really, really wanted a piece of that action. And they created ActiveSync. I'm sure you remember they moved it from a protocol that ran between your PC and the Exchange server to a wireless protocol. And actually, ActiveSync is a pretty cool protocol. It's not as clever as the RIM NOC. It doesn't do real push. It sort of does a hybrid thing where it pushes out something and then the device syncs, but it doesn't matter to the user. It's still push email. And nobody liked Windows Mobile. Windows Mobile just didn't take off, and I think we saw that with Mobile Nations, the smartphone experts, when it used to be called that, the Windows Mobile site. And so ActiveSync didn't get used very much. When the Apple hit the scene, that's when ActiveSync exploded, which was just weird because it took Apple to make a Microsoft product popular.
Well, the iPhone actually makes it's strange in that you start to get a big enough platform that these things. So let me back up for a second, because that was a decision that's interesting for Microsoft, because they made ActiveSync licensable, and that really hurt the Windows Phone division, but it really helped the ActiveSync division, where RIM has been rumored to be licensing things like BBM, and they've just started, maybe we'll talk about on this show or a future show, with BlackBerry Fusion, but they've been very closely held with their technologies, and they haven't let other devices sort of bring them forward with them, and that's an interesting contrast in enterprise strategy.
It really is. So, and this is actually what everybody's now jumped on the bandwagon with. Android phones support ActiveSync, and WebOS phones support ActiveSync. So they all do it the same way. The ActiveSync policies are there too, which means that not only does this protocol allow you to synchronize your device in real time, but it allows you to set up policies on the device, password policies and all of that. So you can really lock it down. You can even do remote wipes. So, one of the things we'll get into on the show in upcoming months is how does each device support those ActiveSync policies? Because one of the important things to remember is that each vendor and each software vendor or OS vendor doesn't necessarily support all of the ActiveSync policies. Yeah. And this is where you get into the gray area of, okay, you can use mobile device management, but which of the devices really supports all of the policies that I want to support? And Android has been very, very late to the game, unfortunately. And the funny thing that we find is that, and I think a lot of the articles that have come out recently have borne this, is that iOS apparently rules the enterprise, and that's because they support the most ActiveSync policies. So kind of an interesting thing happened there where Apple sort of crept in under the covers.
No, actually,
but sorry, to go back though, talking about Microsoft licensing ActiveSync, if you remember, Craig, there was a attempt, I guess it was attempted by RIM to license out the BlackBerry system through the BlackBerry Connect and the BlackBerry built-in platform. I can actually remember playing with a Siemens phone back in, I guess, circa 2005, where they actually had the entire BlackBerry system built into the Siemens phone, fully locked down with, like, it was a BlackBerry inside of a Siemens phone. But like many RIM projects, it just died.
I remember that too. I loved BlackBerry Connect. I was very sad when RIM killed it off. I used to use BlackBerry Connect on a Palm running Palm OS, Trio running Palm OS, and a Nokia running Symbian.
I had a couple of Nokia phones with it. Yeah, absolutely. And
so I think that was one of the blunders that RIM made, was that they stopped doing that, because that would have been a way for them to gain popularity in the enterprise, because the the IT administrators would use the same IT policies. The devices would be connected to the same BlackBerry server, but the user would get the consumer experience. They had it spot on. They had it spot on, and they let it go.
It gave you a feeling that RIM actually could glimpse into the future for a moment and saw that perhaps they weren't going to be all things to all people, but then I don't know, I guess their brain went on vacation or something.
I think that's a really good point, though, because even when you have devices that are driven from the user end and not from the IT down, the consistency is still important to IT. So if someone brings in an iPhone, yes, it's not a BlackBerry, but once they support one iPhone, it's fairly trivial to support 100 people with an iPhone or 1,000 people with an iPhone. But because Android will vary so much by OS version, by manufacturer, I forget which one, but some of the manufacturers were making their own ActiveSync support because Android didn't have it for a while. And at least at my company, it was hit and miss which device could support which protocol could we even get working on the corporate system on any given day.
Well, that still sums up Android today, right?
Yeah. I think that, Isaac, you and I need to work on a good article that actually looks at all these different platforms and has a nice table that lays out which ActiveSync policies each device supports, just to have it, out there in the ether, so people can refer to it. So I see that we're at about 30 minutes, and we promised ourselves we would try and keep it at 30 minutes. And those of you who work in the enterprise, you have limited time. We understand that. We all work in that same space, so we don't want to keep you too long. I just want to say that in the future shows we are going to try and get guests from these different companies like Good Technology or Mobile Iron, App Central, Boxtone, these companies that do this work of mobile device management and that have enterprise app stores and these kind of things that actually help you as an IT person look after and secure these cool mobile devices in the enterprise.
Yeah.
So I guess that's it. We'll be wrapping up, and thanks for watching and thanks for listening, and we'll see you hopefully in a month. And the only time we're going to deviate from that would be if there's some breaking news, like RIM releases BlackBerry Balance, for example. We'll definitely want to talk about that. So
Craig.
Thanks, everyone. And Rene and Isaac, I'll say good day to you.
Craig, where can we find out more about you?
Oh, well, yes. You can find out more about me at about.me/iBanyan, or you can just follow me on Twitter at iBanyan.
Or you could read one of your numerous books detailing all these mobile devices.
Oh, yeah, so I write a lot of the books in the My series. So if you look at My Droid, for example, I just released the second edition of that. It covers all the Verizon Android phones. My BlackBerry Curve is in one of the oldies. I even did My Palm Pre back in the day when we thought Palm Pre's were going to become before the device got killed, unfortunately, but I enjoyed that device. Anyway, there's a book there. So look in the My series, you'll see a lot of them written by me.
Perfect.
And don't forget your BlackBerry professional book, Craig.
Professional BlackBerry, and the funny thing is people
still
will use it today. Those of them are still running BES 4, and they haven't switched to BES 5. It's still relevant. But yeah, thanks very much for reminding me about that.
What about you, Isaac?
You can find me at crackberry.com, follow me on Twitter at Isaac Kendall, or about.me/Isaac Kendall.
Very nice. And you can find me at Rene Ritchie on Twitter. You can find all of us at Mobile Nations. You can email us at podcast@mobilenations.com, or you can leave a comment when the show goes live on the blog. We're going to be here, like Craig said, every month or so. You can go to mobilenations.com/shows to find all our shows, including the device-specific ones for crackberry.com, Android Central, iPhone, iPad. Check them all out. This show will have an RSS feed and an iTunes feed very soon. We'll put those up in the show notes for you. And Craig, Isaac, that was a great first show. Thank you guys very much.
Well, thank you, Rene, for getting up
Thanks,
and putting it all together for us.
I think it's like 2 a.m. Isaac time.
Just about, yeah.
Even his web camera is tired.
Oh my, don't. Yeah, I will be getting a new camera before we do the next show.
Give it a double espresso next time, Isaac.